Game over, man. Game over. Johnny.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
So serious.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 655 for December 23rd, 2025, and I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brennan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us, everybody. We hope you all enjoyed a rapturous day, and that is a good joke if you are chronically online like I am.
I mean, we're still alive, right?
We're still alive. Everyone's good, as of this recording anyway.
The classic show The Leftovers has not become a documentary just yet.
Not yet. Maybe soon, but not yet.
Yeah.
However, we are here to celebrate. It is the week of one battle after another. So we are, of course, going to dedicate this episode to the one and only Paul Thomas Anderson. And look, his filmography is quite rich.
It's okay.
And it's glorious. I think Brendan laid it out quite well when he did his Paul Thomas Anderson ranking on Twitter, where he just laid it out as his entire filmography as number one. And yeah, I think that is very fair. It's interesting. I did see One Battle After Another last night as we are recording this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to my letterbox today to update my PTA ranking, which I did update it, but I thought about that tweet a lot as I was doing that ranking, because the films that I have at like 5, 6, and 7, it's like ripping out my heart and just throwing it down the gutter to have those films listed with a number that isn't really appropriate for what they should be, because they all should be like 1 or 2 or 3.
The most accurate ranking for PTA's filmography is depends on the day. It depends on the day.
What was the last movie that you saw? That's number 1.
Honestly,
And
it could be.
Just kind
Yeah.
of,
It
just
always
kind of
shifts.
cycles through.
It always shifts. I've had different favorites. I've had different least favorites. Actually, I take that back. I will say my bottom 2 PTA films have pretty much stayed in their places for quite a few years, and I don't see those 2 changing. But everything else above it, which is 7 movies, depends on how I'm feeling. I mean, in a way, he's kind of got 7 all-timers at the very least.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I don't think the bottom 2 will ever change for me, but the top 8, and I don't say it facetiously, the movies I have at 6, 7, and 8, I really do think make great arguments for 1, 2, and 3.
Mm-hmm.
It really just depends on how you're feeling, what was the last thing that you saw. In all transparency, I put One Battle After Another at number 4. That is my gut instinct 24 hours after seeing the film. Is that too low? Too high? It might be too high. I don't know. I'm still wrestling with it, but
That'll probably
again,
be your number 7 in a few years, and then it'll be your number 2 a few years after that.
yeah, like it's hard to say, because coming out of the movie, as great as I think that it is, and it probably is the best movie I've seen so far this year. I don't know if it'll stick to that. It might be. I don't know. I'm still really high on Sinners and 28 Years Later.
Mm-hmm.
It is one of the best films of the year, hands down.
Yeah,
I
hearing
can
that a lot.
say that right off the bat here.
Been hearing that this is finally PTA's year.
It is fantastic. I do think this is going to be a big Oscars player, unless it tanks so bad at the box office. But I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, I don't think it
might
really
not.
matters at this point. The budget is so high that there's no way I feel like it can even succeed at this point.
Well, and that's why I wanted to put it into perspective a little bit, and in the sense that it's not going to be a success financially.
Right.
The only thing that would hurt it in terms of Oscars, I think, is if it's a massive failure, like $12 million this weekend kind of failure. I don't think it's going to be that low, though.
What if somehow it becomes this year's Barbenheimer?
Could. And that's always possible, right? Because Sinners comes out and it's this massive sensation. I don't know if the marketing has been there like it was for Sinners.
Right.
But at the same time, Warner Brothers has had such a great year that this film bombing isn't going to affect their bottom line at all.
No.
They've already had a great success. This film can make no money and they're going to still come out on top this year.
This was their blank check movie for the year.
Exactly. Anyway, all of that to say, it is going to be a major Oscars player. I'm very excited to talk about that film this weekend. We will have a review for that coming soon, of course.
Absolutely.
I walked out of the theater extremely high on the movie, but also trying to take a step back and look at it in terms of, the prowess of the rest of his filmography. I still think I have The Master at number 1. But after that, it's such a toss-up. Honestly, it's a toss-up.
I don't know anymore. I go back to that list and I change things all the time.
Yeah,
I've done a few rewatches in preparation for this specific conversation we're about to have on PTA, and I still made further changes.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. And again, like I'm even looking at my own list here, and the films I have at 6, 7, and 8, I can't emphasize enough that I don't feel like those movies are like the numbers underneath the posters are not reflective of how I feel about them, if that makes sense. Like,
well, yeah, look at them
what
for their,
it is.
Look at them for
but-
their respective years, and they're like top 3 for their respective years.
Yeah, they're great. They're one of the very best movies of their years, hands
But
down.
even
no doubt
even
about it.
so, a lot of his later films, this new era of PTA that I would say mostly started with There'll Be Blood. Most of these movies have a tendency to get better with time, and I've been finding that to be the case for me, at least with movies like Licorice Pizza and Phantom Thread, especially. I've always loved these movies, but I'm finding new appreciations for them as I sit with them, because there's something very artful and mysterious about his later period where he's really finding his own voice and kind of shedding his Altman and Scorsese influences that really permeated his 90s and early 2000s output. So seeing what he's doing, he's making movies that are kind of beyond classification. And that makes me always want to go back to them. I love that so much.
Yeah, I agree. His films are incredibly fascinating, complex, hilarious. The characters are endlessly compelling. There's so much about the films that will continue to evolve, but that's what makes them so impossible to rank.
Sure.
I mean, I am not being hyperbolic when I say those top 8. And again, we're talking about 8 movies. At least I'm talking about 8 movies here that are completely interchangeable. Like the movie I have at number 8 could be 1 or 2 for me. The next time I see it, it could swing that heavily. So that is to say, when we came into this episode, we were trying to figure out how we wanted to channel the conversation. Did we want to just talk about our own rankings here? I don't know how different that would be. We contemplated doing a consensus ranking, but
because
as
we're insane.
we've already established here, that might be impossible. Like that's just an ongoing conversation.
It would basically just turn into a retrospective of his filmography. That's basically all it would be.
Yeah. So what we decided to do, and I'm very excited for this, is that we are going to be talking about our top 5 scenes from Paul Thomas Anderson's filmography, minus One Battle After Another, since Brendan hasn't seen it quite yet.
Right.
So we will X that from the conversation for now, but maybe we can do an addendum to that next week once Brendan gets a chance to see it. Maybe we can do a little bit of a coda to see if any of those scenes would make our list. But
I think it sounds good. Maybe some bonus content, because I will be seeing it probably Thursday this week as we're recording this. So I hope to get it at least early enough to prep my thoughts for that particular review, as I know I'm going to need some time to sit with this one.
Definitely. I would see it as early as possible and get ready for that conversation. There's certainly going to be a lot to talk about. I'm very, very excited to dig into one battle after another. So on this episode, we're going to be talking about our top 5 Paul Thomas Anderson scenes. We'll get to that here in just a little bit. We're going to start off the show this week on a little bit of a dour slash celebratory note here, because we did the show last week. We recorded the show, and then the very next day, we got the news that Robert Redford had passed away. And so we didn't get a chance to talk about it on last week's show, just given the unfortunate timing of everything. So I wanted to start the show off this week just by acknowledging the greatness of Robert Redford. As many pointed out on social media, I don't know if there are enough words to articulate the impact he had on the industry. His on-screen presence is unmatched. A movie star of his time, a legend, one of the best to ever do it. Then there's his impact within the industry with Sundance championing indie film.
Absolutely.
That's a whole nother element of his legacy as well. Mount Rushmore type of individual when it comes to Hollywood and movies. Just a tremendous loss.
Actor, producer, spearhead of indie film, as you said, director. We also can't forget director as well.
Yes.
As well as some people have also noted, he was basically one of the last remaining movie stars of the old Hollywood. There are still a few of them remaining, but he was one of the few that we still had, and it's unfortunate to see him go. I think back on a lot of his classic performances. You can cite almost all of them, and I think the general public would react in a way where it's like, oh yeah, I've heard of that movie. Yeah, he just had that kind of magnetic presence about him. I often cite The Sting as one of my favorite roles for him, even though I know that movie gets a lot of flack because it's a Best Picture winner. But if you take the Best Picture winning reputation away from that movie, it's a very fun and entertaining movie. I think really the reputation is that film's biggest problem, but that's not the film's fault. And then you look at something more recent, like his performance in David Lowery's The Old Man and the Gun, which was kind of a legacy performance, kind of a meta performance, a movie about his own legacy in a way. And I think it's quite terrific as well. And then you also have his work as a director, a very versatile list of films as a director, because we tend to associate maybe movies like, I don't know, The Horse Whisperer or something like that, kind of these majestic epics of sorts. When I think of something like Quiz Show from 1994, which one of the best movies of 1994, further proof that 1994 was 1994 one of the best years for cinema as well. But yeah, very versatile, very necessary for the industry, one of the most influential figures for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, whether you want to talk about him as a director, and I don't know if his directorial achievements quite line up to everything else, but he certainly made some good films, and his resume, his legacy as an actor is just remarkable. Like, I don't even know where you begin when it comes to his impact in film history as an actor and all the great movies that he was a part of.
He's done all right.
He did all right. He did. Do you have a favorite performance? I guess you mentioned The Sting. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if that's my favorite performance necessarily, but it might be my favorite role of his.
Gotcha.
Which I know those are very different things.
That could be two different things for sure.
Yeah, but there are some days for him I might, see that as maybe like maybe the same thing in a way, but I don't know, maybe his best performance would be something like All the President's Men, I think.
It's hard not to think about that, right? All the President's Men comes to mind. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid comes to mind. That might be my favorite. I don't know about best. President's Men might be best. I love what he does in Butch Cassidy, though, as the Sundance Kid. And you're right. He did some incredible work in the last decade or so as well. I think about All Is Lost is a film that I championed quite heavily.
A very challenging performance. Yeah.
I think that film should have been Oscar nominated. And in hindsight, we're now 12 years after the fact. Yeah. It's astonishing that he wasn't.
That was a huge oversight given his passing now.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 You know, because people talked about even at that time, well, he might have an opportunity for another one. No, that didn't
Well,
happen.
I mean, it probably should have been The Old Man and the Gun if that were the opportunity.
Yeah, and that's another great performance and a very good film. Yeah, I love that. I mean, but even like his impact in the MCU with Captain America: The Winter Soldier, I think is quite notable in terms of his recent output.
Honestly, his performance made, who is that, Alexander Pierce? Is that who he
Yeah.
played? His performance made that character one of the most intriguing villains of the MCU. Yeah, I don't necessarily think Pierce is all that complex or interesting on paper, but Redford did something to him that made him
He made the
really
character fun.
Yeah, really fun to watch.
Yes. No, I agree. I completely agree. So, like, yeah, all the way up into the end, he was doing fantastic work. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else there is to say about Robert Redford. He's just simply one of the best to ever do it, if not the best. On screen, off screen, the magnitude of his impact, just it cannot be measured.
Absolutely.
Cannot be measured.
Absolutely. One of the best. Absolutely.
R.I.P. Robert Redford. I very much do want to see a Robert Redford movie this weekend. It's been so busy. I haven't had a chance to, but I've been itching to ever since the news came last week.
Priorities.
I'm going to try to make that happen this weekend if I can. All right, let's move on. I want to talk about John Boyega.
Oh,
Okay.
Great.
So this year, The Force Awakens will be celebrating its 10th anniversary.
That's wild. We're so old.
I am going to be writing a piece for that at InSessionFilm.com. I have already started to write that piece. It is going to end up being one of my favorites, I think, that I've written. I did write about Inside Out earlier in the year. I don't know if anything will ever top that or the piece I did on Arrival.
I was going to say, don't short side yourself, man. I mean, the piece on Arrival is always going to be sitting there for you.
Yeah. Arrival and Inside Out, I don't think I'll ever top those two because they're deeply personal. As much as I love the movies themselves and the filmmaking and the performances, they're deeply, deeply personal films. And I do get into why they're so deeply personal in those pieces. The Force Awakens won't quite have that, but I've already put in a lot of words for it. I am going to be championing this film, and that will go out in December, I believe, is when the anniversary is. So a few months still on the horizon, but I am going to be writing about that movie.
That's a movie we saw together in Kentucky.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
All those years ago.
I remember Nate Parsons was with us, and he had to go. He was going to a different theater by himself, though. Remember that? You and I had a screening together, but he had a ticket for.
And then we had to meet up afterwards.
Yeah.
But
I think we all got dinner together beforehand, so it was still technically a 3-part bromance hangout, but one brother had to leave for a moment.
Yeah, that is crazy. All the good memories of Lexington, Kentucky. Anyway, John Boyega in a recent interview went on to explain what he would do differently if he could remake the sequel trilogy. And among his bullet points, he noted that Luke, Han, and other original characters would not die, that he would want to fulfill, quote unquote, fulfill their story, fulfill their legacy. He didn't want the new characters to be overpowered. And one of the quotes, and boy, do I want to talk about this, is that he said, they won't just grab stuff and know what to do with it. And then he also added that he wanted to include elements from the Old Republic and the Force Unleashed stories. I love John Boyega. I think he's a really good actor.
Terrific.
I think he's great in those Star Wars movies. I am deeply grateful that he did not write them, though. I did not want any of what he just said.
He sounds bitter, and I don't really blame him, though, because most of what he is talking about, I feel like, is still, once again, a response and a reaction to how The Rise of Skywalker specifically came out. Because there is a lot of what he's saying there that kind of trickles back into the criticisms of that movie in particular and how it illustrated the problems with the sequel trilogy. I'm with you. I think he is very good in those movies. The material fails him, though. The production style for those movies, the studio overseeing and how they came together without a plan completely fails the Finn character, though. So I understand why he feels that way. I don't particularly love his ideas, but at the same time, I do feel bad for him that a talented actor like that got shortchanged by this sequel trilogy. And even more so because Finn was set up in The Force Awakens to be a fascinating character. The idea of a stormtrooper switching sides. And the movies kind of do nothing with it, sadly. And I feel bad for him. So I sympathize with his point of view, but I'm also with you that I'm glad he didn't necessarily get his way from a writing standpoint.
I'm glad that he didn't either. I do think that The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, and we've talked about this many times here on the show, but to reiterate, I think those two films are excellent. And I think they're way more complementary to each other than they get credit for. Really, it's The Rise of Skywalker that fails that trilogy. And that would have been an opportunity to do something interesting with Finn, even if some of what is established in The Force Awakens isn't quite followed through in The Last Jedi with his character. And maybe that's where some of that bitterness is coming from, to your point. Yeah. And I can understand why he felt a little let down. Now, I think The Last Jedi is masterful for many reasons. I have a few nitpicks with it. I've talked about the Luke stuff.
It's a messy movie.
And I don't know if I love the Finn stuff in that film either, but I think everything else around it is so good that I'm willing to overlook those blemishes. What I love about The Force Awakens, and this somewhat circles back to his comment about, they just wouldn't grab stuff and know what to do with it. I think what's disappointing about that comment is that he is completely missing the point as it relates to The Force Awakens. What JJ does with that movie, and honestly, I think this is a talking point that just isn't really sifted through enough, so it might not just be a John Boyega thing. I think this is something that just needs to be talked about more. But I think what's brilliant about that film is that JJ toys with mythos and legend in this fascinating way where Rey and Finn and that generation, they don't really know about they don't know anything about the Force. They don't know anything about the Jedi. They've only heard stories passed down through legend. So as they find themselves in these situations that tap into that mythos and lore, that's what the character's instincts are. Right. So it's not just that they know what to do with it. They don't know what to do with it by themselves. The reason they know how to react in certain situations is because of that passed down storytelling structure that JJ taps into, which I think thematically and even narratively, I guess, given how that film goes, I think is brilliant. I think that's nothing short of brilliant. And sure. I think it's incredibly subversive in that regard. And I just don't think JJ gets enough credit for that.
Kind of did set up the subversions of The Last Jedi for Rian Johnson in some ways. They were just more subtle, and Rian Johnson went and ran with them. They were much louder in that film, which made him the target for those subversions.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't agree with John Boyega in that regard. I think what JJ does in terms of those subversions is astonishing. And I don't want the conventionality Reddit-like theories that he's running with here.
I will agree with him on that point in one specific example, but it once again goes back to The Rise of Skywalker, which is why I feel like most of these comments are tracing back to the failures of that movie in particular. I think of scenes like when Rey all of a sudden for no reason has healing powers, right? Like that's an example of where I think that point that John Boyega might be making does have some validity, where it's all of a sudden they have these powers and there's no context to justify them, even though I do believe a character like Rey could potentially learn those abilities, but the movies never filled in those gaps for us. So it did make it seem as though she was overpowering for really no reason. So I think for that example, I could see where he's coming from, but to trace it back to The Force Awakens, I do agree with you. I think he is missing the point a little bit more when you look back at where these movies started.
No, I completely agree. And even with the healing powers, I mean, that same theory might apply. I just think the way everything is rendered in that film from an execution standpoint, it feels manufactured because they were making all these changes on the fly and doing all these reshoots, and the film famously had all of these production issues because the studio was trying to pander to
it
all
was
of the
damage
backlash.
control. It was damage control. And
yes.
And I often say this, and I've said this many times on this show, but for any new listeners out there, I'm going to say it again. If somehow The Last Jedi was broken up into 2 movies, maybe it ends with the death of Snoke, and then the third act of that movie is actually the episode 9, that is the sequel trilogy we should have had right there.
Yeah, I agree. Or they go with the original script from
Colin
face?
Trevorrow.
Colin Trevorrow, which also sounded interesting. I think that could have worked, even if
Had a
you
better
went
title.
in yes, for sure.
Duel of the Fates. That's a great way to round out these 9 movies.
Yeah, even if it's not Colin Trevorrow directing, maybe you don't want to hire him to direct the movie. But I think the script, his ideas were far more interesting than ultimately what we got. And I don't blame JJ at all. Obviously, he was thrust into a no-win situation with The Rise of Skywalker. But I think those first 2 are great. And I understand Boyega's bitterness. I do think, though, that much of this interview, and I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt here, I'm taking this in good faith that these are ideas that he really wanted to implement.
Yeah.
But all of like what he's talking about here, outside of maybe adding elements from the Old Republic, I wouldn't mind having a bit more of that, I guess.
No, there's an argument that maybe that stuff would have been better served in something other than the episodic movies.
Which is also understandable.
Yeah.
Which is generally I go to, or I lean toward, these ideas are pretty conventional and not really all that bold or interesting to me, which is what I love about those first 2 movies, because I think they are doing some incredible subversive work. The unfortunate maybe consequence of that is that his character is one of the lost causes as a result of those subversions.
Yeah. Yeah,
So-
he was. And I do feel bad for him because I think he was set up to potentially be one of the more, if not the most interesting character in those sequel movies. I think he could have been. And I think he's
I
very good
agree.
in The Force Awakens, especially that he could have. I mean, if you gave him a Star Wars movie to carry as a lead, he could absolutely do it. And I would be compelled to watch it. As I
Yeah.
think he's that talented.
And I still go back to, I think what we see in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi with just his character, forget everything else, but just his character and his relationship with Rey in The Force Awakens, he's separated from her in The Last Jedi. If the film, if the Rise of Skywalker would have emphasized that character more and did something to crystallize not just his relationship with Rey, but his relationship with Poe as well, which a lot of fans wanted to see more of.
Yeah.
Then I think you could have those first 2 movies exactly verbatim as they are.
I agree.
I think a lot of this just simply comes down to The Rise of Skywalker not following through on the promise of those first 2 movies.
It broke.
think
It
that's
broke
all
it.
the- that's
It
all
broke
it
it all.
is. It broke it.
It broke everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of like, for anyone that listened to our review of a big, bold, beautiful journey from this last week, I championed so much of that film until the ending. And then I think the ending quite heavily impacts, like,
it's so
pulls the rug out
misguided
from the film. Yeah, like it severely undercuts it. And that's a lot of what The Rise of Skywalker did to that trilogy.
Yeah, it should have been called The Fall of Skywalker.
The Fall of Disney. The Fall of Disney Star Wars. That's the new title of it.
Well, we're seeing a lot of, outside of Andor, we haven't been seeing a lot of Star Wars that has been worth really talking about, have we? I mean, there's been some good stuff, right? But like, has anything really given us that same level of, oh my gosh, Star Wars is special again, outside of Andor?
Well, no, and that is a great transition to our next talking point here.
See how I set you up for that?
We get the trailer for The Mandalorian and Grogu. So to answer your question, no, there's not a whole lot to look forward to. And look, I've really liked The Mandalorian for the most part, especially those first two seasons, I think are great. And I've, even that last season, it was a little choppier, but I still liked it overall. This trailer that we get for this movie, to me, it's quite evident that this was never intended to be a movie. This was like meant to be another series that they chopped into a 2-hour movie.
This is Moana 2 for Star Wars. That's basically what this is.
Yeah.
It does not look good. And it's unfortunate because if you've seen the poster and the way that the title, The Mandalorian and Grogu, pops up on screen for that trailer, it's going for these like old school, almost 1940s B-movie vibes, like these old Universal monster movies in a way, which is kind of an interesting approach and an interesting style. But when the font and the poster have more style than the actual visual substance from the trailer, something's not right. And that's exactly what I'm getting from this. It looks like TV. I don't see anything of artistic merit from what we're getting in this trailer.
Yeah. It is TV that they cut up to put into theaters. Honestly, it's kind of embarrassing. I was embarrassed watching that trailer. I don't understand. I mean, some of this comes down to them perhaps losing subscribers for various reasons for Disney Plus. Maybe this is a way to try to recoup some assets because Star Wars historically has done pretty well at the box office.
Sure. And
maybe this will be a way to help recoup some assets. I don't know. But man, it is so lazy and cheap. If this is the kind of Star Wars content we're going to get, where they just lazily and cheaply put this stuff together and then throw it in theaters and hope that it makes gobs of money, as much as I want to root for this film because I've liked the show, there's a part of me that wants to actively root against it at the box office and for us to vote with our wallets that this is unacceptable. It's unacceptable.
We don't want to see that happen. We don't want it to set a trend or set a new precedent for things we don't want to see going forward. I think we'll be having a very similar conversation later when we get more footage for this Starfighter movie that's coming out, which I already don't have many high hopes for, just given the fact that it's directed by Sean Levy. That alone gives me a lot of pause for that particular project. But between that and what we're seeing now with The Mandalorian and Grogu, it does feel like it's a vote with your wallet mentality as opposed to voting for the quality, which is what Star Wars used to always be about. Say what you will about the prequel trilogy that George Lucas directed. They are flawed movies, some of them actively bad, but they are the vision of a single mind. And 20th Century Fox let him make those movies the way he wanted to make them. And I've really come to appreciate just the sheer audacity letting him do his thing. And we're just not seeing that with Star Wars. And it's unfortunate.
No, it is unfortunate. I mean, or on the other end of that coin, or if I'm to play devil's advocate with you here for a moment.
Sure.
I think you can argue that there is a singular vision in the sense that Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni, who have been kind of spearheading this project, I think for the most part, there has been a consistency aesthetically and spiritually with how they've crafted that series. The problem is, at least in this case, is that they've crafted that for TV. They've crafted it for Disney Plus. And I don't think that it's, I don't think there's necessarily an excuse, especially when you watch something like Andor, which looks cinematic. So, Favreau, you have some explaining to do. Why does this look cheap and lazy comparatively? But that aside, okay, I do think there's been a consistency, but to your point, as far as quality goes, is that good enough?
Well, that's
for TV, maybe, but certainly not for the theaters.
Well, and also to continue this whole devil's advocate conversation, this other side of this conversation, of this point that I brought up earlier regarding George Lucas. When he made those movies, all Star Wars was, as a visual medium, was just those 3 movies. So that's all they had to focus on. That's all the time was spent on. Now you've got Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni spearheading quite a few series in what feels like the span of 1 year. It's basically the Marvel problem. Once again, it's like how we've talked about Kevin Feige himself being spread too thin, that he and his team and really just the budgetary restrictions of all these properties, they can't lend themselves to make products that actually feel cinematic. Like they're just spread way too thin. And I think that's the problem with Star Wars. We may have a singular vision. It's just the masterminds at Disney they're not allowing the time and effort and budget to allow those visions to feel like something more. And that I think that's what's missing.
Well, and that's where this last Starfighter is going to be an important what's the word? It's going to be this important, I guess, deciding factor as to what the future of Star Wars is going to be. The Mandalorian and Grogu, I maintain, and you called it the Moana 2 problem, that it looks like it was shot for Disney Plus. They recut it and they're going to put it in the theaters. Okay.
Yep.
I don't love that tactic.
Yeah, it feels like an obligation.
Before, but that was something that was probably decided in the midst of production. Maybe it was post-production, whatever the case may be. They didn't pre-plan for that to go to theaters, which is why it looks the way that it does. So it's a little forgiving in that regard. Now, to your point, what you were just talking about, The Last Starfighter was always going to be a movie that's going to theaters.
Sure, yeah.
This is the end of The Mandalorian. The Acolyte, they have canceled, unfortunately. Andor is done. There is no other Star Wars on the slate. This is all they have right now. And we've joked about this before where they announce all these things, but they don't actually follow through on anything with Star Wars.
I don't know. Apparently this one's actually happening.
So this one's happening. They're shooting this right now. But this is it. They don't, like, they have removed, to their credit, I guess, they have removed the Marvel problem. No Acolyte. We're done with Mandalorian. Andor's done. This is all we have.
I guess Skeleton Crew is done as well. They have some of these
Skeleton Crew is
ones.
done. That's all done. All we have right now is this. So if it comes out and it looks the same, like it has this same cheapness, this Disney Plus cheapness to it, then I think we know that their filmmaking nucleus is to make this cheaply, to make it look like garbage, and then hope they make gobs of money. And in that case, again, we have to vote with our wallets. We can't allow this to be acceptable.
I'm going to laugh if we find out that 80% of Starfighter is shot and then Sean Levy is fired and gets replaced by Ron Howard.
That would be... look, all I want... Like, I'm hoping here that I am wrong. That
Me too, man.
Again, The Last Starfighter, knowing that it's going to theaters, will, at the very least, I'm not saying it has to be good, but at least it looks like a movie. That it belongs in the theaters. I at least want that. Because right now, most of what we're getting from Disney, especially on the Star Wars front, Not much of it has been cinematic.
I agree.
Outside of Andor, which makes you wonder about
Where their
how
priorities
Andor
are.
looks the way that it does, but everything else doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. I don't
Yeah, I kind of want to be a fly on the wall during those meetings when
Yes.
they talk about these things.
like. How does Tony Gilroy go? I'm going to make this look like a movie, even though it's going to Disney Plus, and they're like, "Yeah, you get the green light for that." But everything else, absolutely not.
He must
How
have
does that work?
He must have the right personality to get what he wants. And when you hear him in interviews, I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. He might just be a really good negotiator. It might just be that. It might be that.
Or he's better at utilizing the budget that he has. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess to be fair, Andor is more conspiratorial. It's espionage. It's
more grounded. It's
more
not
grounded.
The
Mandalorian is more action oriented, and we're going out into space and we're visiting all of these worlds, and it is more expansive in that regard. So maybe that's unfair, but still, it's wild that Andor looked the way that it did, which was awesome, and then not much else. How much else looks like it cost all that much?
Yeah, I just want Star Wars to feel like Star Wars again. That's all I'm looking for.
Yeah. So anyway, the Last Starfighter, we'll see. If it still looks cheap and fake, then maybe there's just no hope for Disney Star Wars.
Yeah. I don't know.
See. Anyway, one last thing before we get going. What did you think about the trailer for The Bride? This is interesting because this is a film that I feel like they announced years ago. And it was supposed to come out 2 years ago. Then it was supposed to come out last year. Now it's coming out in March.
I
finally got a trailer.
I had it as one of my most anticipated films of some year. I forget which year it was. It may have been 2024.
23, maybe?
Maybe 2023. The trailer looks nothing like Maggie Gyllenhaal's last directorial effort, The Lost Daughter.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah. This is going to be a weird comp, and you might not remember this, but there are so many aspects of this trailer that reminded me of the initial teaser for David Fincher's The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, when they called it the feel bad movie of Christmas. Remember that?
Yeah.
Obviously that utilized a very different rendition of Led Zeppelin's Immigrant Song. So the soundtrack had a very particular personality to it, but they carried similar vibes, like almost like these very like Fincher-like vibes between this new trailer for The Bride and that one. And I couldn't help but think about that. It looks weird. It looks wild. That's all I care about. It looks like again, this goes back to what we were talking about with Star Wars and why we feel like there are so many problems with it. This, The Bride specifically, looks like it was the vision of some artistic mind. It might not be good. In fact, it might collapse on itself, but I'm probably going to respect the hell out of it that Maggie Gyllenhaal got this thing made, because I'm surprised it got funded. It looks wild.
Yeah, it does look pretty wild. I'm very, very excited for it. And yeah, I mean, I just love that filmmakers are able to not just have this kind of ambition, but are able to realize it in some sort of way. And this looks absolutely insane. Like, I don't foresee this film having any sort of commercial success. It's understandable that they're moving this to March, much like a Mickey 17 that was never going to be a commercial hit by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, it's the Mickey 17 of 2026.
It 100% is going to be that.
Yeah.
And I really liked Mickey 17, so I'm very hopeful for The Bride. Man, but like just visually, this film just looks striking. It looks so innovative and unique, and I'm curious what this is going to be from a storytelling perspective. I really liked The Lost Daughter. I had some issues with that film. So, I'm not exactly sure what to expect though, because to your point, this looks so wildly different that it might not be fair to compare to The Lost Daughter in any way, any stretch of the imagination. So
yeah, I saw a lot of people on Twitter making the comparison to Joker. I think someone
I did see
tweeted
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I
I
think
saw
someone
that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, Joker 2 Electric Boogaloo, I think someone tweeted out.
Yeah. There's been a lot of
which
those jokes. Yeah.
I guess that is a pretty apt comparison considering that the Bride's cinematographer is Lawrence Shear, who shot both Joker and Joker Folie à Deux.
There
So,
you go.
okay.
That makes sense. There
So
you go.
Joaquin Phoenix is just going to show up randomly in this movie.
Yeah, it's the cinematic universe, the Bride Joker cinematic universe. That's what we have to look forward to.
The Universal Monsters DC thing.
Yeah.
I don't even know what you'd call that. Can't think of it off the fly.
But Sinners came out in March, I believe. What if The Bride is just the Sinners of 2026?
If
Maybe
that
that's
movie,
why they moved it.
if that movie goes on to be an Oscar contender for 2027, that'll be amazing.
It would be. I just can't get enough of the visuals. I'm looking at this trailer and I'm watching it over and over again, and I'm just like, maybe I just will walk into the theater not caring about what the story is. I'm just gonna be
Just
blown
vibe with
away
it.
by the visuals. I'm gonna vibe with it, just eat up the performances.
Isn't this
And
also a musical?
I believe so, and it's a musical, so I can't wait to see what that's like.
That's
But
insane.
the cast looks incredible. Yeah, yeah, it's gonna be sprawling. It's gonna be epic. I can't wait. Looks fun.
Looks interesting.
All right, Brennan, it is the fall, and with the fall comes cooler weather. In most states, that's not mine, but I'm trying not to be bitter about it.
Well, you can fake it, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I've got
I
a
try to.
fireplace in my house, and when
Yeah.
I've got that fire brewing and the weather's what it is, man, having a great cup of Joe in hand, that is
It's the best.
that's my therapy.
I have a fake fireplace, mostly for vibes. Just
Is it just projected on your TV?
no, it's an actual like it's built into like this I don't know, like cabinet, I guess.
Okay.
And we like you couldn't mount your TV on top of it. We have our TV
Okay.
mounted on the wall, but it's
Kind of
right
like those
below it.
gas fireplaces that are like controlled by a pilot light, I guess.
Yeah, it's like that. And actually it can get hot if you want to turn on the heat. So I guess there is
Sure.
kind of an electric component to it, but obviously
Well, there you go.
we don't need it to actually get hot. But you can turn on the fake flames and just have the vibes of the flames.
Yeah.
So we do that
Hey,
sometimes.
But as long as you have a comfortable chair near it and you get a great coffee in hand, like from
That's
Coffee
it. That's
Cult,
all you need, right?
that's the
Exactly.
dream. That's the dream.
That's all you need. And that's what we love about Coffee Cult, because they source specialty grade coffee only. So we're talking about high-end gourmet coffee. This is not coffee that you're going to find at your local grocery store that requires you to put in milk and sugar just for it to be drinkable. This is incredible coffee that has natural flavor notes of
Yeah.
blueberries and strawberries if you want to drink something like the Harar. Or the dark roast has great notes of cinnamon and chocolate. So it just depends on what your flavor profile is, what you're looking for. They have all kinds of great stuff there. Coffeecult.com is where you want to go. Coffee with a K, call with a K, coffeecult.com. Use our code ISF25. I almost
it.
forgot the code there for a moment.
We're still in 2025, baby.
ISF25. You'll get 15% off with that code. It is one of the highest discounts that they offer. So you want to take advantage. ISF25 at checkout. You'll get 15% off. Again, this is great coffee. It'll change your life. You'll never go back. Once you start drinking great quality coffee, and I promise you can tell the difference. You can taste the difference. If you don't believe me, try it out. Get their dark roast.
Yeah.
Go to the store and buy the shittiest dark roast you can find, and I promise you, you're gonna taste the difference.
Yeah.
It is
One's gonna taste
huge.
like burnt water. The other one's not.
Exactly. So go check it out. Again, that's coffeecult.com, and we thank them for their support. All right, Brendan, let's talk about podcasting. We love it. We've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah, for a while. And we've had
Yeah.
one service, one host really running things for us, and it's allowed us to be doing what we love for as long as we have.
Yeah, we love Libsyn. We have used
Absolutely.
Libsyn from the very beginning. So if you're wanting to start a podcast, you're not exactly sure what to do, who can host your podcast, that's where you want to check out Libsyn, Libsyn. Libsyn is a podcasting service. They host over 75,000 podcasts worldwide. They are a combination of liberated and syndication. It's a platform where you have all the tools available to you, and they make it super easy. You upload the audio, enter in the information, click published, bada bing, bada boom. They do the rest, and your podcast goes anywhere you want it to go.
Absolutely.
It is super, super easy. And they have all the stats that you need if you want to track your stats, if that's something that you need and want as well.
Very helpful with social media engagement, allowing you to actually understand what those stats mean. More importantly, great customer service when you need it.
Yeah, I have loved the customer service. Every time we've had an issue, and we haven't had many issues, but if something comes up, I get a hold of them. Someone gets back to me pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And we get things solved. It's really great. So if you're looking to start a podcast, I highly recommend Libsyn, Libsyn. Go to Libsyn.com, and at checkout, use our code ISF. Again, that code is ISF, and you'll get 2 months of podcasting for free. So check it out. 2 months for free. And if you don't like it, look, you got 2 months of podcasting in.
Yep.
No harm, no foul. Again, that's Libsyn.com, Libsyn, Libsyn.com. That code is ISF, 2 months for free. And we thank Libsyn for their support. Okay, with all of that said, let's go ahead and transition to the great Paul Thomas Anderson. We are here to talk about our top 5 Paul Thomas Anderson scenes. I did have to look this up on the website to reinforce that we have not done this exercise, because when I was doing some homework for this, I found out that we had done a review of Magnolia on the old extra film format back in 2018, and I did not remember that at all. And it was hilarious because we sat here and specifically talked about with our 1999 retrospective that we're not going to be talking about this. We won't do this film for review. We won't do this film for review. It's been covered before. So we landed on Magnolia, and I just completely, I don't know why, just blocked out of my mind that we had.
I did too. I totally forgot. We apparently lumped it with Punch Drunk Love. It was a dual episode. Did you go back and listen to that by chance?
Nope.
I did not either. I'm kind of afraid to.
I am curious. Honestly, I am curious, but I did not go back to listen to it. If I had time, maybe I would have, but
well, as we talked about with Magnolia on our, current review, the one we think everyone should go out and listen to now, I did talk about my relationship with that movie and how I've kind of fluctuated on Magnolia to the point that it was at once my favorite PTA film, and then at another time it was one of my least favorites, and then it made its way back up, then sometimes finds itself in the middle and then back up. It's a very mobile film when it comes to PTA's filmography. So I guess it's only appropriate that we review it a second time because your relationship to that movie is really based on the when that you are in your respective lives. Things could shift. You can have a different perspective at the time you review it a second time.
For sure. And that has happened before on the show. There have been reviews where we have revisited them for whatever reason, for those reasons. For Ryan and Jay wanting to cover them. So we have doubled up on some reviews. This one, Magnolia, was just a bit funny to me because it was the first time we had done it unconsciously. I just didn't. Oh, yeah.
It was definitely an oversight.
It was still appropriate. Even if I was conscious of it, Magnolia, I think, still makes sense. And I'm really glad that we did because, again, I still think that it's arguably the best movie of 1999. And for all the reasons we talked about last week, it might have been, if not for our whole little flub there on Princess Mononoke, which was a whole fun element to that show.
It was going to happen sometime. We were going to make that mistake.
At any rate, love Magnolia. So I did verify we have not done this exercise. I am really looking forward to this. So I guess as we get into it, did you have any criteria for your list here?
Yeah, I did. So the first thing I'm going to say, and it's appropriate that we just got done talking about Magnolia a little bit here. my first criteria is that I'm not picking anything from Magnolia. And it's because I can't. I can't do it. We talked about this quite extensively on our review of Magnolia, the editing of that movie, and how it flows kind of like one continuous 3-hour scene in a way, right?
Mhm.
Which is why I can't pick a scene from that movie. I feel like they're broken up into sections, sequences, but there's not really a scene in Magnolia. And I feel like to do so would be kind of disingenuous to this exercise. At least it would be for me. So for those reasons, I left off Magnolia because I feel like I really wouldn't be picking scenes. So that's my first criteria. My second criteria is I'm also limiting my 5 specifically to 1 scene per film. So I'm not going to be repeating films here, which might not make it the truest of lists. There's probably a few scenes from a particular film that really would be eligible for me. But I want to add some variety here. And I do think it's also pretty interesting when I look at my 5, and I'll talk about this further as I reveal them. While PTA's films are so beautifully shot and they feature stunning set pieces, all of my picks are more dialogue driven. They're more based on exchanges between characters. And that'll certainly be evident when I get to my picks, but I do think that's pretty interesting how I'm focusing on more of the nuance of his respective films, the little things. And I think in a way that makes his films it makes his films everlasting in a way. That's why I keep going back to them, because of these small things.
Yeah, that's very fair. I only had one criteria here.
Okay.
And that is that I also limited to just 1 scene per film. I didn't want to talk about 2 scenes from the same film.
Yeah.
That was really my only criteria. Given what seems to be happening with one battle after another and the extreme praise that it is getting, how Paul Thomas Anderson seems to be this filmmaker that is collectively bringing everyone together in film Twitter. I don't know if I've ever seen anything like it before. There are very, very few things that have brought film Twitter together.
South Korea was another one.
Yeah.
Parasite
PTA
specifically.
is someone that we all collectively agree is one of the very best working today. And I think in the spirit of that, I really did want to keep this to as true of a list as possible to honor the prowess of Paul Thomas Anderson and his great work. So I didn't really want to have too much criteria to dilute that, if that makes sense. I really want to highlight why he is one of the best that we've seen over the last 30, 40 years. So I didn't really dilute this. This is as close to a true list as I possibly could, while maintaining the variety of, I want to at least include 5 different movies here. I did want to extend it because, again, going back to the beginning of this conversation, his top 8 films, or depending on the person, maybe all of them for you, they're all interchangeable. So I wanted to highlight as many films as possible here.
Yeah.
So that was my approach to this. Okay. With that said, let's get into number 5. What do you got at number 5?
My number 5, I'm going to the year 2014. I'm going to Inherent Vice. And I mostly just want to go to Inherent Vice for the sake of just being given the opportunity to say the name Bigfoot Bjornsson, which is maybe the greatest name ever.
I love it. Absolutely love it.
The scene I'm going with is when he breaks down Doc's door towards the end of the movie.
Okay. Yes.
And it leads to this really strange exchange where they actually talk in unison for a moment. Sorry about last night. You? Why should you be sorry? Which then Doc, played by Joaquin Phoenix, very hilariously replies with weird. The reason I'm picking this scene, it mostly stuck out to me in a very new way when I gave the film a rewatch earlier this week in preparation for this conversation. I made a really big mistake rewatching this movie a certain way. And that way was with subtitles on. So
Okay.
Because the magic of this movie is not being able to follow it. And if you actually read everything that's going on, you can find coherence. You can find a narrative through line. You could see, like, you can understand where things are going.
Yeah.
And that kind of takes away the magic a little bit.
Yeah.
Until this scene, which is in many ways Paul Thomas Anderson and I guess Thomas Pynchon as well, telling you as the audience, none of this matters. None of this matters at all. And I just love how brazen it is in a very hilarious way. One of the funniest scenes that I think I've seen in a PTA film for sure. So that's also why it's in my number 5. But I just love the sheer audacity of PTA to come out and say, yeah, you shouldn't be paying attention to this. This means nothing. It really doesn't. And I appreciate the audacity there. So that's why it's my number 5.
Love it. That is a great moment. I will be talking about Inherent Vice here in just a little bit. I will be talking about a different scene, but I do love that one. And you're right. There is a charm to Inherent Vice in the sense that it is this mysterious, manic, erratic movie that just kind of meanders all over the place. And I do love that it has the audacity to kind of be about nothing while simultaneously digging beneath the surface of that veneer.
Oh, it's a very lonely film as well.
Yeah.
Well, we might talk about this later, but it's actually kind of a good comedic companion piece of sorts to The Master, given where that film ends.
Sure.
I feel like it kind of is.
Yeah, I think there's a bubbling underbelly to Inherent Vice. And I think the comedy in Inherent Vice is incredible. I love it. It might be my favorite film comedically of PTA's, but I do love that underneath that lunacy is this deeply poignant underbelly as it relates to loneliness and longing for something.
Yeah.
Which I deeply love. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but I do love that moment that you brought up there for sure. All right. My number 5, I'm going to Phantom Thread, and I am going to pick the final scene that everyone raves and salivates over.
One of the best line drops in any PTA film.
It's so good. And obviously this is such a great movie about power dynamics among relationships and how that evolves over the course of the film, the progression of Alma being the muse, going from being the muse to the one who ends up doing all of the using is incredible. And it ends in this brilliant way where Reynolds is relenting power over to her and giving her all of the cards, so to speak, in this not quite ambiguous. There is an awareness to what's going on, but there's just this scintillating, almost fantastical playfulness between the two that I think is really great. And I love that back and forth in the relationship. And yeah, the dialogue, the exchange of the characters that we see at the end, it is simply some of PTA's best work. And you couple that with the craft of the film, the performances, what PTA does with the camera, and it just is one of those great endings in Paul Thomas Anderson's filmography. And honestly, that is maybe one of the more underrated, perhaps, aspects of his movies. Like, that's another top 5 that would be challenging for me.
Endings? Yeah.
Yeah, just the endings. If we're just talking about ending scenes, that would be hard to rank, I think.
I know. Well, I mean,
Phantom Thread is certainly up there, though.
Maybe that could be our consensus ranking next, to rank his endings, but not just his
the
films.
Ending scenes, yeah.
Actually, I don't know if I could do that. I think a lot of people would probably try to push for There'll Be Blood as maybe his best ending, but it's his loudest ending for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
But I love the ending to Inherent Vice, though, too. Maybe more so than most people do. I love the ending to The Master. I think that's also really great. But I do think maybe it does come down to Phantom Thread and There Will Be Blood. Those two final scenes are maybe the most striking. I am not going with the final scene to There Will Be Blood. That is an honorable mention for me. But Phantom Thread, that final scene here, it is unforgettable. Really, really great. So it's my number 5.
Kiss me, darling, before I am sick.
Yeah.
What a
Just
line
a
drop.
brilliant line of dialogue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a nice transition because my number 4 is also from Phantom Thread. It's not that scene, but I think it does tailor very nicely to the scene that I did pick, because I do think there is thematic synergy between your scene and my scene. But earlier in the film, there's another one of my favorite PTA comedic sequences that also has a lot of thematic bite to it. And it's a pretty small scene when compared to some of the more uh, obvious verbal exchanges from this movie. But the scene where Alma and Reynolds attend Barbara Rose's wedding and she gets drunk and they have to
Yeah.
take the dress off her, that is my number 4.
Okay.
It's primarily because it's just really funny. But at the same time, it's maybe the one moment in the film where each of their respective quests for dominance over the other comes together in a very beautiful way, where it's not merely codependent. And I feel like this movie's main argument, especially when depicting love and relationships, when one of the two tends to exact more control over the other, sometimes the best relationships are the ones that do treat it as purely a partnership. And
Yeah.
in this scene, that's when that partnership and their duality is in perfect unison with each other. And it ends with one of the most passionate kisses I think I've seen in the 2010s. So like, I think in a way it's kind of a great yin and yang to my scene and your scene, because your scene sort of emulates that same kind of thematic idea, but it's one person now almost like forgoing control back to the other person, sort of abandoning it, giving up on it. But maybe there's still a little ambiguity that there is still this interplay between them as their lives go on. Maybe the rest of their lives are Alma gets him sick. That's how she relents control. And then he takes it back. And then they just keep going back and forth. They're just this weird, quirky, kind of grotesque pendulum. But the one moment where it actually seems kind of healthy for once is, I'd say, this wedding scene. So that's what stuck out to me in this rewatch for me. And honestly, it might be my favorite PTA comedy, purely a comedy. I think it is a great romantic comedy in a lot of ways. Maybe
it's very funny. It's very, very funny.
Maybe his best crafted film in a way. Just the craftsmanship of that. I mean, you could say that about almost all of his movies, but there's something so particular about the way Phantom Thread is crafted that makes it unlike anything he has done, while still feeling very much like a PTA film. And I find that astounding about the movie.
Yeah, man, he knows how to work a camera, and you couple that with the performances, the lighting in his films. I mean, the scores that he gets. He's just a master craftsman, and he makes movies that are wholly entertaining, often very funny, but also have these great moments of dramatic bite. They're thematically rich. Phantom Thread certainly qualifies in all those areas. And that is another great scene too. And I do love how you're talking about how there's just this rhythm that they ultimately create in terms of shifting the power dynamics in this perverse, but like almost self-aware way, even though it's not openly talked about, but something they just act upon. Like it's so fascinating.
It's their
how that
kink.
comes together.
It's basically their kink, essentially.
Yeah, it's their kink. Yeah. How that comes about is just incredible. No, I love it as well. Good stuff. All right. My number 4, I am going with Magnolia here. So, and this is the Frank Earl scene near the end of the film. That's the one moment I'm going to go with here. And I think what sticks out to me the most here, I think honestly, is just the Tom Cruise of it all. There's so many great scenes in this film, and I do agree with you. It's almost acting as one gigantic scene for 3+ hours, and it's absolutely masterful in that regard. But I do think, as it relates to everything we talked about during that review in our 1999 retrospective, as it relates to the film being about the sins of our fathers, how that tethers to Exodus 8:2, if you refuse to let them go, I will plague your whole country with frogs, which is in context this story where the Pharaoh's heart is so hardened that he is, it keeps him from releasing the Israelites despite warnings of miracles and that things could happen. His stubbornness ultimately is what brings out these plagues. And obviously the film is reimagining that and infiltrating these characters' hardened hearts to depict their pride and their bitterness and shame and where much of that is born out of and how it becomes their own kind of plague. And obviously with Mackie, who is having to grapple with so much of that directly in this film. Some of it starts earlier in the film when his misogyny and bravado is kind of poked at in the interview scene. But as he gets to this moment with Earl near the end of the film, you really start to see that armor crumble in this incredible way. And it is arguably Tom Cruise's best performance and maybe individual moment of acting is in this particular scene. And there's just something about the relationship of the thematic underbelly of that film, Tom Cruise's performance, that deconstruction of that bravado, the emotion that comes out, and then the PTA filmmaking and craft where we get those incredible close-ups on Tom Cruise. And of course, some of it is intercut with other things happening, but that whole series of events and that conversation and how that unfolds is just breathtaking. It is exhilarating filmmaking, and I find myself on the edge of my seat, despite the film, to your point earlier, how so many of these great scenes are just conversations. And that's ultimately that's happening here. It's just the conversation, but there's something about the sorrow of it, the childhood trauma that is erupting into the, onto the surface there with Mackie and laying it all out there in this incredible way that is as angry as it is poignant. And it's brilliant. It's absolutely incredible. And people talk about Tom Cruise even recently, even this last week, there's been viral tweets about how Tom Cruise should have won an Oscar for this performance. And he should have. He really should have won an Oscar. And it's one of the best performances in a PTA film. So it came to mind for me, and it's my number 4 here.
And it went to Michael Caine, who won his second Oscar.
And I'm not the biggest fan. Not the biggest fan.
I still haven't watched it yet. That was a blind spot for me during that retrospective.
Yeah, not quite my favorite, but
I would have probably considered Magnolia for this list, or at least I should say I would have considered this scene for Magnolia if not for my earlier criteria that so much of Magnolia just feels like one scene. So it's really hard to pick things out and because so much of what happens here between Frank and Earl, it's also intercut with other exchanges that are continuing between John C. Reilly and Melora Walters, for instance. There's so much intercutting happening that it's like I don't know where to separate the scene from, right? But if I were to broaden this a little bit and pick what I would say are more exchanges or just mere moments, then I would probably consider this one because I do think it is very powerful for all of the reasons that you said. It's actually a pretty nice transition into my number 3, thematically speaking, because you talked a lot about failed fatherhood as a central theme, and not just that movie, but it's also a theme in many of PTA's films, and it's also very evident in There'll Be Blood from 2007, which is at my number 3. And for my scene from this movie, JD, just be thankful that I've never called you a bastard from a basket.
Okay.
So that's my pick here. This is the final exchange, the parting of ways, if you will, between Daniel Plainview and his quote-unquote son, HW. Specifically, what makes this scene great is not just the exchange between these two characters, it's the flashback that concludes it, which features Daniel very lovingly playing with HW as if he were his real son. And it kind of leads to these questions as to, was this something that even really happened? Was this just a figment of either HW's or Daniel's memory, or was it like their memory being warped by grief or something like that? And the reason why I like this scene is because it's what makes a movie like There'll Be Blood linger for me. The film's depiction of capitalism, religion, not that complicated. It's not a bad thing, but that portion of the film, I would say, is not that complex. But where the nuance comes in with this movie, I think mostly stems from this scene, and it comes down to Daniel Plainview's motivations. What was it that made Daniel Plainview so torturously ambitious in his life? What is his history? Was he ever really a good person? And especially with that flashback, it raises these questions and actually adds a lot of ambiguity as to the man of Daniel Plainview, as opposed to just the ambitions of Daniel Plainview. And by the time the movie ends, you can kind of read it in different ways emotionally as to whether this was a tragedy, as to whether he actually did get what he wanted, and you can almost maybe not celebrate it, but see it as kind of a fist in the air moment for people like him.
Yeah.
But I think that scene in particular, and the way it concludes with a very ambiguous flashback, adds a lot of nuance to the character of Daniel, and that's why I keep going back to that movie as a depiction of failed fatherhood in many ways, like you talked about with Magnolia, and that's why it's my number 3 pick here.
That is a brilliant moment. It's great, and I guess we sort of share the same scene here. It's a little bit different, but they're very much working in conjunction with one another. This isn't my number 3, but this is my number 2. I'll just go ahead and reveal this here.
Okay.
But my number 2 is the oil erupting scene.
That's yep. Probably the best set piece, the closest that we've seen an action set piece from PTA, but I know where you're going with this as far as why this is a great scene.
Yes, I absolutely love it because I do agree with you. So much of what's brilliant about this film, and I feel like so much of the discourse is around the back half of the film when we see him become this ruthless business person, but we don't actually see that until we get to the aftermath of this moment where the oil erupts. Because up until that point, there had been, at least on a couple of occasions, these evocative examples of Plainview's compassion, especially towards HW. And the best example is when the oil rig fills with gas, it erupts. HW gets blown back, and Plainview's immediate response to that is to run after his son. And he grabs them and he tells them, "You're safe now," which is such an incredible moment. Gives a lot of authenticity to him as a father and how he really feels about HW. That shot of Plainview laying down with HW there after fixing the fiery well, it is such a gorgeous moment reflecting his humanity and love for HW, which continues in the next scene when they go to visit the doctor and his reaction there. Like, he is a compassionate, loving father. Unequivocally, he is. His ruthlessness doesn't come until after that tragedy. You get to that moment you're talking about, and he realizes that in order for him to succeed in his business, he has to send HW away. And then once he makes that choice, then there's a complete progression to him becoming who he is at the end of the film. And I just love that turning point, that pivot, and how it begins with him recognizing that his love for HW, it is deep, it is unmovable, and it is black and white. It is mutually exclusive. He can either be a great father and family man, or he can be a great business person, but he can't be both.
Yeah.
And it's that, to me, I think is, it's a stunning moment in that movie.
And you see a glimpse of the monstrous side of him come out in that scene that you picked there, especially towards the end of it, when you have both Daniel Plainview and his business associate, Fletcher. Fletcher asks him, is HW okay? And Daniel Plainview just says, no, he isn't. And that's it. And Fletcher's the one that runs away to take care of him. But Daniel stays behind and watches the rest of the oil rig go. So like that's like the first glimpse of the business side of him, the ambitious side of him taking over. And that's the brilliance of this movie. Like when I think about There'll Be Blood, I'm thinking about the emotional side of it, which I think sometimes gets lost in the conversation. It was certainly a perfect movie for our time when it came out in 2007, as it really spoke to the sociopolitical paranoia of that time, especially as it relates to capitalism and religion. So there was definitely something timely about that.
Yeah.
And I still think those aspects of the movie are very timely and they're very telling and they work for that movie, but it's not necessarily the thing that I always think about with that movie.
I agree. Yeah, those themes are secondary, very much there, prominent for sure.
Yeah, and
but
they
I
work.
think secondary to the more humanistic element of the movie.
Right.
At least
agree.
for me.
I agree.
love all that stuff in the film. Yeah. All right, good stuff. So that is my number 2, your number 3. Should I just go ahead and review my number 3 then?
I'd say go to your number 3 and then I'll go to my number 2 after that.
All right, so my number 3, this is where I'm coming back to Inherent Vice. And I'm going to show this film a lot of love. I know people push back against this film, but I do urge people, if you haven't seen the film more than once, and especially if you haven't seen it since 2014, I hope that on a rewatch you are able to get more out of it. I do think this is a really great film. In fact, I do think it's honestly one of his best movies. And what's great about the movie is that on its face, it is hilarious. It's this drug-infused journey that does meander quite a bit. And to your point earlier, I haven't seen this film with subtitles, but
I don't recommend
the charm.
I got to a moment where I was maybe halfway through. I was like, wait a minute, this movie kind of makes sense to me. I don't like that.
Yeah, very fair. I haven't had that experience yet, and I guess I won't. I will take your recommendation there. But I do love that the film kind of purposefully builds this mystique around it. But what I love about it is that, yes, there, as I noted earlier, I do think there's more bubbling underneath the surface, which is what I love about, as I have dubbed it, the Shasta scene that takes place about 3/4 of the way through the film. And what I love about this moment, Doc, for one, to, I guess, provide some context and a foundation here, he is someone who, from the beginning of the film, is constantly longing for reconnection with Shasta, his ex-girlfriend. And everything he does points back to him searching for a way to remedy that feeling for him. It is quite evident early on that he is searching for something and often finds a way to bring her into the conversation when he's talking to other characters. So much of the drama and storytelling tethers to that idea of Doc searching to fill this void, which then leads to, eventually anyway, this incredible moment where they finally do reconnect briefly when Shasta shows up to his place unexpectedly after a short, albeit pretty funny interruption when Bigfoot calls Doc on the phone. Shasta walks into the room with nothing on but this necklace. And she starts talking sensually about her experiences with Mickey in this teasing sort of way. She then lays across his lap and eventually they have sex. But aside from the sexual tension of the moment, what's so incredible about it is how tender it is. It's by far PTA's most sexually evocative scene, and the way he stages the interaction in terms of composition and framing is remarkably redolent. The cinematography in this scene is out of bounds. It is so ridiculous.
Robert Elsop, baby.
I love how that also plays into the scene's tenderness, where after they have sex, there's a great shot of Shasta laying there with Doc as he's rubbing his fingers on her skin. And it ends with Shasta confessing that she was his quote unquote, or that she was quote unquote inherent vice. And there's voiceover narration explaining that inherent vice is something that you can't avoid, like eggs breaking, chocolate melting, that sort of thing.
Right.
And Doc wondering what that meant in regards to ex-old ladies is the exact quote. Shasta being the thing that he could not avoid. And knowing that, whether consciously or unconsciously, it brings closure to Doc in a way. There is some ambiguity to it, but there's certainly a level of closure to him there. And I love how that also repeats itself at the end of the film where they say something to the fact that, like, this doesn't mean that we're back together.
Right.
Even though they have sex, she says that. They repeat that at the end of the film. So there is some ambiguity as to what their relationship is or isn't. But that moment of reconnection, that's the thing he had been longing for the entire time. He finally gets it. PTA is aware of how important it is and shoots it as if this is the last thing he's ever going to shoot and this is going to be his legacy.
Right.
It is stunning, the level of craftsmanship there. And I don't know if there are enough words in the English language to articulate how ravishing Catherine Waterston is in that moment.
Oh,
she is so good.
Up until that point, Shasta was far and away the best female character in a PTA film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think maybe
I
the
agree.
jury's out, given, I've heard a lot of great talk about, what's her name? Chase Infidel in One Battle After Another. I don't know if I'm getting her name right, but of course, there's also Alma, played by Vicky Krieps in Phantom Thread. Cyril, played by Leslie Manville, also in Phantom Thread. But up until that point in PTA's career, the character of Shasta, probably his best female character.
Yeah, honestly, to me, I think the only argument is the Phantom Thread ladies. They make a phenomenal argument.
Yeah.
And maybe that is the right answer. But even if those are your 1A and 1B, I think Catherine Waterston in Inherent Vice is easily number 2. Easily. And I think she's very much in that conversation for number 1. Like, she is truly mesmerizing in that film. And I do love how there is this mystique around her. You understand why Doc is fantasizing about her constantly, or desperate for that longing, desperate for that reconnection. Like, she gives so much credence to it, and that is such a vital element to that film because, as you noted earlier, loneliness is such a big part of the film that is bubbling underneath in Doc. And this is such a pivotal moment to that film emotionally and thematically. And I love how it plays out in this propulsive way, this, sensual way. It is sexually intense at moments, but it's also tender and soft and warm. To me, that moment makes the film in a lot of ways. It's very funny. I would have really liked the film just as a movie.
Sure.
But moments like this, I think, it registers in a new and different way that, again, boils back to what I love about PTA. He's able to do things on the surface that are entertaining, and then he's able to give the film bite in other areas.
Oh, yeah, yeah. One of his best traits is that every one of his movies that he has made, they have a certain thing or a certain element about them, but they're never about that thing. Like Phantom Thread. Oh, this is his fashion movie. It's not really about fashion. Oh, There'll Be Blood is his oil movie. It's not really about oil. Oh, The Master is his Scientology movie. No, it's not really about that either. It's like every one of his movies is like I call it a not really movie. And Inherent Vice may be the strongest example of that because, it pushes itself as a 1970s detective story. No, it's not really that. So, and this is another great example as to why.
Yeah, it's a movie about longing and reconnection, and I think, like, the way that film goes about examining that in Doc, I think is really great, and it crystallizes impeccably in that particular moment. She does show up at the end of the film, of course.
Yeah,
but to me, that's the moment where there's a turn in Doc. Like, like there's a bit of a turning point there for him. And I think it's brilliant. I absolutely love it. Love Inherent Vice, love that moment. And
All right.
underrated. That is an underrated moment in his film.
We'll conclude this conversation with maybe where our rankings sit at this present moment, but I would agree with you. It's underrated.
All right. So I already gave away my number 2. So your number 2.
My number 2, I'm going to the year 2021. I'm going to Licorice Pizza. And maybe I spoke too soon by talking about some of PTA's best female characters, because I think another one that joins the argument is Alana, played by Alana Haim in this movie. I think
Definitely
she's
in
also
that
part of that.
conversation too.
Yeah, definitely part in that conversation. And the scene I'm going with in Licorice Pizza, there are many. I almost wanted to go with the entire John Peters segment and the whole backwards truck down the hill set piece, which is honestly one of the most thrilling,
very good
scenes in any film I've seen in quite some time. But I'm gonna go with the waterbed scene for my number 2.
Okay,
Yeah.
I kind of wondered if you were going to have this on your list. I know you've talked about this before.
Yeah. So it's probably not much of a surprise. And I know a lot of other people that have highlighted this scene for probably very similar reasons as I'm going to get into now. This scene obviously follows a brief excursion that Alana has with the Jack Holden character, played by Sean Penn, obviously inspired by William Holden. She falls off his motorcycle during this Evel Knievel-like jump. She and Gary embrace, and this amazing needle drop of Let Me Roll It from Paul McCartney and Wings from 1973 starts playing. And this whole scene is further proof as to why I've always called this more of a coming of de-aging tale as opposed to a traditional coming of age tale. This moment for Gary, when they meet on the waterbed and Alana falls asleep, this moment for Gary is every 15-year-old's dream, every 15-year-old boy's dream, especially in the 1970s. I'll put it bluntly, he has a clear opportunity to touch her breasts, right? What does he do? He recoils because he knows doing so would not be right.
Yeah.
And what I love about this moment and this scene in particular is how it uses a gesture like that to illustrate Gary's arc. Because the Gary that we met at the beginning of this movie would have absolutely caressed her breasts. He absolutely would have done that. But in this moment, Gary is showing signs that maybe he won't become like the Jack Holdens of the world. He won't fall into those same kind of ugly trappings. He doesn't need to grow up too quickly, as this world seems to push people into. It's interesting that as a 15-year-old, he portrays himself and carries himself like he might even be older than Alana. But he doesn't need to do that. It's okay to just be a kid. Learn from those things and be who you are. And you don't need to grow up too quickly in a world dominated by shitty people. And I love how this moment is, in many ways, kind of the thematic summation of the movie without giving anything away. And then at the end, you kind of think about how it fits in with the grander picture. But I do love the tenderness of this scene as well. It's a very tender film, even despite the way that PTA likes to call attention to itself, given the whole age thing, which we don't have to talk about here. But it is something that I think is thematically crucial for why that movie works. But I think this scene's a great example as to why. So that's my number 2.
I love it as well. This is a great honorable mention for me. I do think this is one of the best scenes of that film. There are some really great moments here that I really wanted to include on this list. But I love Gary and Alana's relationship in this film, and what you're talking about in terms of that innocent romanticism that he embodies throughout that film, and ultimately how that evolves in the character is fascinating. There's such a genuine sincerity to it, and I do love how he changes while kind of maintaining that vigorous youthfulness that is still at the beginning of the film. It just kind of matures in this fascinating way by the end. But that waterbed moment is certainly one of the pivotal moments for the character,
and certainly one of his best needle drops in any of his movies.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, what do you got at number 1 then?
Well, number 1, I guess we have some crossover here. At least it sounds like we're going to have the same film at number 1. I don't know if we have the same scene, but I'm going to The Master from 2012. There are a few we can talk about here.
Okay.
I almost went with the processing scene, the initial
Okay.
processing scene between the two of them, but I'm not going with that. I'm going with the final scene between Freddie Quell and Lancaster Dodd.
Okay. So another ending.
Yeah,
Yeah.
another ending. And I'm just gonna throw a line drop here. I talked about this earlier with Phantom Thread, how that final line from Reynolds Woodcock, "Kiss me, darling, before I am sick," is one of the best line drops in any PTA film. But it doesn't quite hold a candle to this. For if you figure a way to live without serving a master, any master, then let the rest of us know, will you? For you be the
Yeah.
first person in the history of the world.
It's a good
I
line.
mean, this might be a line that's PTA was basically trying to make the next great American novel with a movie like The Master and even movies like There'll Be Blood. But with this line, he almost succeeded at that. In fact, he may have succeeded at that. Because this moment is both Freddie and Lancaster's realization that Freddie will remain lost forever, continuously searching for something that he will never find, and how some find it impossible to not serve anyone other than themselves. And there's a tragic nature to that. Very strangely, this scene also concludes with Lancaster Dodd singing the song On a Slow Boat to China by Frank Lesser, which, again, kind of illustrates how Freddie's arc has literally come full circle. I believe, I don't recall this, but when Freddie initially leaves Doris to go to war, right? Doesn't he go to Shanghai or something at one point? And then
I can't remember.
I don't know if he goes to Shanghai, but at the very least, there is still a parallel between the way he says goodbye to Doris and how she sings to him, to then, Lancaster singing to him as they part ways, and Freddie ends up exactly where he started the movie. I
Yeah.
think this scene epitomizes both the strangeness of the entire film, how it's beyond genre classification, but also its sadness. This is probably the saddest and loneliest thing PTA has ever made, this movie in particular. And it might be the most tragic love story of the 2010s, not just between Freddie and Doris, but if you want to call it a bromance between Freddie and Lancaster, one of the most tragic versions of that as well. I don't know if The Master is my pick for PTA's best movie, but it is certainly the one where no one else could have made it. There's nothing else like this movie. And that certainly makes it one of his best for sure.
Yeah, I do think this is his best movie, at least as of this recording. Now, as I continue to wrestle with one battle after another, maybe that will creep up and overtake that number one spot. I don't know. And again, I just rewatched Magnolia, so that's pretty high on my list at the moment as well. So I'm still very much wrestling with my ranking as if that means anything. It obviously doesn't. His films are great.
He has
And
one film ranked at number one, filmography.
filmography. His whole filmography is number one. But I will say, I do think at the very least, The Master is my favorite. And I do think it is his best. And there is something about this film and that tragedy and the mechanisms that lead to these characters revolting in the ways that they do that I just find utterly fascinating. They're certainly dramatically inviting, but again, in terms of the emotional turmoil that they also denote here, I do find that deeply empathetic and poignant. And I think for me, as much as I love that ending, and I wholeheartedly agree with you there, for me, it begins with that processing scene. That, for me, will always be one of PTA's best scenes. That is my pick here for number one. It was my number one scene of the 2010s. I think it's one of the best scenes of the 21st century, and maybe even beyond. I think part of it is, again, to echo much of what we said in this conversation already, it is the craft. It is the simple framing and composition of it, which is, again, maybe a bit underrated. This is almost antithetical to the Inherent Vice scene I mentioned earlier, which, and I didn't even talk about the use of color. The use of color in Inherent Vice is stunning. It is incredibly redolent. I love the blue and orange hues specifically in that moment, and how PTA uses that to enhance the sensuality of that moment. With the processing scene, it's stark. There's more of a dullness to it, aesthetically speaking.
Yeah.
And I love that simplicity because it allows for us to simply focus on the exchange between these two characters. And Joaquin Phoenix and Philip Seymour Hoffman, they give two of the best performances, again, not just of 2012, not just of the 2010s, but of the 21st century so far. Those two performances are astounding, exhilarating in every way. You have two actors at the very tip top of their game. Honestly, they both deserved Oscars. They deserved all of the awards. And they are going toe to toe in this moment in the most breathtaking way possible as he's being processed. And of course, Freddy is being asked these questions that he initially mocks, he scoffs at them. But as it goes and as Dob begins to get beneath the veneer of that sarcastic tone in Freddy, he starts to slowly kind of unravel a little bit.
Sure.
And it gets to a point where he does kind of lose it near the end. And so much of this moment is indicative of how Freddy's past trauma has created this giant void in him that he is looking to fill at all times, something that he remedies with alcohol and sex and obsessions that continually repeat themselves in Freddy's life. And I love what the film has to say about addiction, how it's rooted in reprisal, making it your master, if you will. And this processing scene is a phenomenal microcosm of what that becomes in the larger scope of things. And I think it is impeccable by the literal definition of impeccable.
Yeah.
I absolutely love it.
It probably is the best scene in the movie. I am more moved by the exchange at the end because it just reveals how tragic and sad this movie is. Even though there is still a lot of that in that scene that you brought up there too, the processing scene, it's all over that. And the technical craftsmanship and how the camera just lingers. It's one of those instances, once again, like I said with Magnolia, the whole 2.5-minute sequence in the What Do Kids Know back office studios, that one take sequence. You don't really notice it, right? The same could be said about the craft of that scene. It's basically a one take sequence where the camera is just stationary, but you don't even notice it. It's not calling attention to itself.
Yeah.
And I also love how it adds further complications into Lancaster Dodd's methods. And if you want to play the game as to whether he is credible or full of shit, I mean, there's evidence of both in this scene. Because on one hand, you can argue that his religious beliefs, his religious dealings, if you will, probably have some questionable forms of evidence. But at the same time, what he does to Freddy, the processing itself, does psychologically work on him. So, so as a psychologist, I think you could say that Lancaster Dodd knows what he's doing. He's not an idiot. So I believe that he probably does have a PhD in that type of field. So he knows how to tackle those practices to target the human mind. He might just be doing it in a very questionable way. So I do like how this scene does add some added layers as to whether or not you want to take him at face value. If you choose to watch the movie in that way, if you want to look at it more surface level, it does still give you some complicated things to wrestle with. It's a strange beast of a movie, and I love it.
No, I completely agree. And I think what's interesting about the tethering of these two scenes, because you are right, there is a bit of effectiveness to Dodd's methods, even if they're morally ambiguous, but they're also flawed because there's an innate recoiling to perhaps what is really driving those actions in Freddy, which is ultimately why it leads to that exchange you get at the end of the film, and that line, that specific line that you mentioned. That's something that Dodd could never really get to the heart of. Like he was kind of treating some of the symptoms and not getting to the core of it. And ultimately that's why Freddy could maybe get by at times, but ultimately there was no hope for him. And it just leads to
perhaps he's past help.
Falling. Yeah, absolutely. I love it. I mean, The Master to me is, I don't know, like the more I talk about it and the more I think about it, I don't know if PTA will make a better film than that for me.
I think he has said that himself. I think he has said back in like 2018, he feels like this might be his favorite movie of his, but that was in 2018. That was still some time ago. So who knows? He said the same thing about Magnolia when he made that, and now he doesn't agree with himself anymore.
So who knows? I mean, again, I'm going to give myself some time on one battle after another, because, that is a film of the time for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll just kind of have to wait and see, but I do think The Master is a full-on masterpiece that's probably one of the best movies ever made. Like, just full stop. I
mean, PTA's got like 7 of them in that category.
That's also true. That's also fair.
Clearly, we are fanboys. I will absolutely own up to that term when it comes to PTA. I'm a fanboy.
I agree. Yeah, I can't help myself, but he's one of the best. So what are you going to do? Normally this is where I would ask for honorable mentions, but I don't even know.
I don't know where to start.
I mean, because again, it's just like, are we just going to sit here and talk about 50 other scenes that could easily be in this conversation because these movies are so great?
I don't think we should do that. That just sounds like a waste of time, honestly. But I will say this. Yeah. I did have a number 6 that almost made it into my top 5. I'll at least highlight that one. And that was the He Needs Me needle drop from Punch Drunk Love. The whole reunion sequence between Barry and Lena. I almost thought about that sequence. So that almost made my list.
Yeah, I have A Love in My Life. That confrontation with the mattress man also made my list as well. Yeah, I thought about that one heavily. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that one was pretty close. And also, I thought heavily about Licorice Pizza. There were several here that I wanted to go with. So, I mean, obviously a ton of other scenes that we could sit here and talk about, but we'd be here all day.
There are a lot of great scenes in Boogie Nights. Boogie Nights is one of those movies where I can rewatch individual scenes and love every second of it. But I will also say this. Boogie Nights is far and away my least favorite PTA film, as I've talked about earlier, because it's the one film of his where I really feel like he's just simply trying to be someone else and not himself. And clearly that worked for him because that exercise in pastiche allowed movies like Magnolia to get made. Then that allowed Punch Drunk Love to get made. So because he made something like Boogie Nights, we have the filmography that we do. So I'm glad the movie exists as it does. It's just I prefer when PTA is being PTA and not when he's being Martin Scorsese.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of filmmakers, especially if it's hard to find funding, the easiest thing to do is to tap into
what's popular.
Filmmaker, something that's popular, have it be successful, and then go on to have a career where you can make it your own. PTA is certainly not the first, nor will he be the last to do such a thing.
That's we talk about that a lot. That's his Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's still a very entertaining movie. I don't dislike Boogie Nights, but I don't get much out of it outside of its exercise in pastiche. It's just a very entertaining version of that.
Yeah, entertaining pastiche. And look, I mean, as a film to launch your career, I mean, nothing wrong with that.
No, I do slightly prefer Hard 8 over Boogie Nights, but those are still my 2 least favorites of his.
Yeah, I mean, I go back and forth on it. I mean, I like Hard 8. I probably would just need to rewatch that. It's been such a long time for me. I need to give that one a go. I might slightly prefer Boogie Nights, but that could just be the entertainment factor of that film kind of creeping through. But
So are those two your least favorite?
yeah, those are
they just
9 and 10
alternate?
for me.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah. But the top 8, the other 8 movies, again, could be interchangeable. I have Licorice Pizza and Phantom Thread at 7 and 8. And again, as I noted earlier, you almost can't think about it in those terms because I don't feel about those movies like they're 7 and 8, if that makes sense.
No,
Like,
I agree.
But math is what it is. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. I have those at 3 and 4 at this point right now. Licorice Pizza at 3 and Phantom Thread at 4. But I don't know. It's just how I'm feeling right now. That's going to change tomorrow. I mean, I've very openly said that There'll Be Blood might be in my top 10 of all time. And after this exercise, I don't even know if it's my favorite PTA anymore. It might be The Master, actually. So
yeah, I have those at 1 and 2, respectively.
So,
yeah, I mean, they're just, these are great films. They're impossible to kind of rank. But that's why I'm being a little conservative about One Battle After Another, because I truly think those two are all-timers. And maybe One Battle After Another is also an all-timer. There's certainly been a lot of hyperbolic, phrasing around that film. But I don't know yet. I've only seen it the one time. It's been a day, literally 24 hours as we're recording this. So I need to give it some time. I do think it's one of the best films of this year, though, at the very least.
Sure.
But
I think a lot of these movies will become all-timers. I think Phantom Thread will become an all-timer as well. I think there's a huge audience for that film in particular. I think movies like Licorice Pizza and Inherent Vice will probably remain more as cult films in a way, which I love. I love that they feel kind of like these detours of his. And I appreciate that for those movies. I will say, there was a point in my life where I had Punch Drunk Love as my favorite. And I think I'd have that probably around number 7 now. Just goes to show how this fluctuates.
I have it at 6. And forever I had that in my top 3. But if I was to rewatch that tomorrow, maybe that would completely change this list too.
Well,
so,
I did try rewatching a little bit of it in preparation for this conversation. And I realized that the reason why it latched onto my number 1 for quite a while was purely looking at it through Barry Egan's perspective. But Paul Thomas Anderson is so good at giving us other characters to latch onto. And when I tried to look at it through the lens of modern PTA more specifically, I did find myself thinking, I would have liked to have had a lot more of Lena, played by Emily Watson, in that movie. And that's not really a detriment to the movie. She's kind of meant to be this sort of fantasy of sorts. You're almost meant to question whether she's even real or not. But there is a lot of logistical aspects to that movie that seem to prove that she is part of this story. And I would have liked to see more of her, honestly.
Okay. All right. Well, with all of that said, if you agree or disagree with anything we had to say here, please leave a comment below. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, hit us up, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky. You can always email us InSessionFilm@gmail.com. So our reviews for this week are already out. We reviewed a big, bold, beautiful Journey, the Coconut film. And I kind of went to bat for it. I think the ending is unfortunate.
Very.
But I think everything up until that point is actually quite good. I really liked it. But that ending, it is unfortunate. So we talk about that. We also talk about Eleanor the Great, in which June Squibb is once again a national treasure. So you can go ahead and give that one a listen as well. And then as I noted this weekend, for this next week, we will be talking about One Battle After Another. And then I think the other film we're going to try to get to is Twinless.
We will.
And,
I've seen it.
I'm very excited to get into that one. So be on the lookout for that. There will be a new Chasing the Gold. Shadon and Erica will be back for another round of TIFF, talking about her favorite films from this year's Toronto International Film Festival. And then there's going to be a new Women in Session at the end of the week, as always, as well. So you can be on the lookout for all that. Great stuff happening on the website, InSessionFilm.com. Dave and all of the writers over there doing great stuff. As always, there was a new piece out today as we are recording this on the 30th anniversary of Toy Story. And I almost cried.
That's cute.
Not just because of the writing. The writing was great, but I cannot believe that film is 30 years old.
I remember going to that movie with my family over and over again, waiting in line. I still have my old ticket stubs for that movie.
That's crazy. I don't know. I don't think I saw that film in theaters.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I
think
guess
so.
like
I don't know.
I mean,
I
how
can't remember,
how
though.
old were you in 1995?
10.
Yeah.
Would have been 10. But I think that's when I saw it home, but I don't know. I could be misremembering. Either way, it's crazy that it's 10 or 30 years old. But I do want to shout out
it
Lane
feels like
Mills,
10
who
years
wrote
old.
that. Yeah, no, it feels like 10. It should be 10.
Yeah.
30 years old. Shout out to Lane Mills for that
It was a great
classic review there. All right. With all of that said, thanks for listening, everybody. Have a great time watching PTA this weekend, and one battle after another. Our review coming soon. Stay tuned for that. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time on the InSession Film Podcast. Gotta love PTA.
I drink
Anyone else like-
milk.